Jason Donovan put on his dream coat, Joseph was already 23 years old, having started life as a 15-minute school concert before being expanded for the stage. Its child-friendly appeal made it the perfect vehicle for a teenage pop idol.
But I wasn't prepared. I'd come off a major tour and I suddenly landed myself in a rehearsal space in Battersea, surrounded by, 40 or 50, West End performers who knew their stuff, and I could have barely sung the melody to Any Dream Will Do at that point. Not because I couldn't, because I hadn't invested the time in getting up to speed. So it was a very big awakening that day.
I wore my coat with golden lining.
Opening in 1991, the union of pop star, soap star and tried and tested musical proved to be a winning combination.
We used to stop just outside the stage door of Joseph on a Saturday afternoon. There was almost thousands of people at the stage door. This was a sort of a musical phenomena.
A crash of drums, a flash of lights.
After Donovan left, children's television presenter Philip Schofield took over. The celebrity turnstile proved to be a model others would follow. Older pop stars also had pulling power if their fan base was strong enough. Cliff Richard could even overturn a lifetime of wholesomeness when he starred and financed an adaptation of the novel Heathcliff.
The reason why I loved Heathcliff was that it's totally against anything that anybody's ever read about me. I really loved thrashing my stepbrother to pulp night after night, beating my pregnant wife to the floor. I loved it. Okay, I took him to dinner afterwards, but I found it fairly easy to slip into being Heathcliff, who was so against everything that I believe in. I can't imagine myself doing it, and that's why I did it myself, because no one was going to offer me that part. So I woke up one day and said, Cliff, I'd like you to do Heathcliff. And I went, yes, okay.
Despite scathing reviews, Cliff's name ensured Heathcliff became one of the few new musicals of the early 90s to turn a healthy profit.
I mean, it was all my own money, and I'd spent £5 or £6 million on it, pounds, and we broke even in 4.5 months. And I've heard of musicals in the West End, musicals I've been to and really enjoyed, who after 2.5 years haven't broken even. So yeah, we were successful. The last 6 weeks were all profit.
But celebrity could be a double-edged sword, as Andrew Lloyd Webber discovered when casting the central role of aging film star Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset's big problem, you have to find the female star. And there's only so many female stars out there that can do that role or want to do that role. And also when you hire stars, female stars, who you put in rehearsals and you realize that they really can't sing, and then you have to pay them off.
The actress Faye Dunaway's launched a multi-million-pound lawsuit against Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber after the composer removed her from the Los Angeles production of his musical Sunset Boulevard.
I sang in my range. He cast me in that range, only later deciding to try to push me into a higher one.
The combination of legal battles and enormous running costs meant Sunset failed to live up to the giant Lloyd Webber hits of the 80s. Meanwhile, Cameron Mackintosh had avoided celebrity cachet for the musical Martin Guerre, continuing the model of the epic scale mega musical. But even after extensive rewrites, it failed to draw an audience.
Martin Guerre was back to the average run. I mean, it was 2 years in London, which is not bad at all, but it was not the big hit.
You can't program hits. They come and they don't come. That's the nature of the theatre.
That'll be the day when I die.
Although still giants of the West End, Lloyd Webber and Mackintosh could no longer guarantee a hit with their names alone. Instead, pop music was the rising star of the West End. In the late 90s, unknown producer Judy Kramer would harness the power of pop to completely rewrite the rulebook of what a successful musical could be, using the music of one of the most fondly remembered bands of the 1970s.
I just loved ABBA's songs. I mean, I felt there was something very theatrical in those songs, and used to put my own little kind of selections together, trying to make a story out of the songs.
One day she came to me and said that she wanted to do a television special, as they were called in those days. Something, you know, an hour-long program loosely based on ABBA songs.
I was so tenacious to try and move this forward that I knew that Tina Turner lived close by to my office that was in Notting Hill at the time, and I went and shoved a script through her letterbox, and then I got a rather curt letter from her manager telling me that I shouldn't have done that. So it might have turned out to be a BBC Two film with Tina Turner in it.
If you change your mind, take a chance on the first in line.
With the TV project stalling, Kramer looked to turn the idea into a stage musical and started looking around for a writer who could turn a back catalogue into a workable story.
I phoned my agent and said, I'm really, really skint. Please find me some work, anything. And he rang back a couple of days later and said, I know a producer called Judy Kramer who's looking for somebody to fit a story to the songs of ABBA. And I burst out laughing, and he laughed too. And he said, yes, I know, but it's probably worth a meeting, isn't it?
Take a chance on me.
Despite Johnson having never written a West End musical and Kramer never having produced one, Benny and Bjorn agreed to develop the idea.
I gave up my job, I sold my flat, and I formed a company with Benny and Bjorn. They put in the music and the lyrics, and I put in the hard work and the risk, in a sense.
I have to say that I was ready at any point, you know, to put a stop to it. If I had felt that, this isn't going the right way, this is not good for ABBA.
Money, 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 always sunny in a rich man's world.
Earlier pop-based musicals had mostly been biographies using an artist's back catalogue. What would make Mamma Mia different was that it was a brand new story.
I thought the ABBA story would be very dull and not very interesting at all. I mean, I had gone through it myself, so I know.
What really inspired me at the time was wanting to write about being a single parent, as I was, and there being an awful lot of kind of stuff in the media about single mums and, you know, how they were letting their kids down and scourge of society, blah, blah. So I wanted to write something that was very positive about being a single parent. So the next stage was to sit down and just read the lyrics over and over again until characters started suggesting themselves.
I work all night, I work all day to pay the bills I have to pay. Pain inside.
Mamma Mia's story of a single mother reuniting with 3 former boyfriends, any one of whom is the father of her daughter, turned the musical upside down. Usually musicals take a pre-existing story and shape new songs around it. In Mamma Mia, it was exactly the opposite. Old songs, new story.
Money, 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 must be funny in a rich man's world.
On opening night in April 1999, Mamma Mia took the West End by surprise. Not only was the music good, but the story worked.
After the opening night, it was the first time I dared think that, yes, this is a huge success. I didn't know then how big it was. But only a month after that, I think we realized we were onto something really, really big.
Mamma Mia returned a sense of fun to musical theatre, largely absent from the days of the 80s mega musicals. Broadway beckoned, and the show went into production in September 2001.
We had just started rehearsals in New York. And I thought, no, we can't go ahead with this. This is, how can we? This happy, careless kind of musical.
Mayor Giuliani at the time was encouraging Broadway to get back, very much so, within days. I mean, Broadway is such a, economic kind of jewel to New York and tourists, and trying to make people feel that New York was getting back to normal.
When Judy talked to the people over there, they said, oh, please, please go on. It is the best thing you could do for New York, to go on with a musical like this. Just go on.
I was cheated by you, and I think you know when.
10 months after the last British success, Miss Saigon, closed on Broadway, another very different West End musical triumphantly opened. Mamma Mia became the poster child for the Jukebox musical. And it wouldn't just be pop acts that would follow in its wake. For the first time since Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar, rock music would once again be enticed back into the theatre.
Our manager was always quite keen on the idea of a Queen musical, and we were going, no, it's rock and roll, Jim, we don't do musicals, we're the antithesis of musicals. And of course, much later, we lost Freddie, and then we started to think about Queen again, and what was there left to do? And obviously, one of the great solutions is to put on a musical where you don't need to have Freddie, you just have young people to act, young people to sing, young people to play, and so we were attracted to the idea from then on.
Everybody wants to put me down. They say I'm going crazy. That's right, I got a lot of water on my brain. I ain't got no common sense. I got nobody left to believe in.
Initially planned as a Queen biography, once band members Roger Taylor and Brian May brought on Ben Elton as writer, the story quickly changed into a work of fiction.
I thought what we really want here is something that represents the spirit of the band, not the facts of the band. Of course, the first word that springs to mind with Queen is legend, and of course their fabulous sort of gothic scale to much of their music. And so I thought what we want is a legend, something Arthurian, and immediately a guitar buried in rock as opposed to a sword, because it should be fun, it should be silly.
We Will Rock You would tell the futuristic story of a group of youths searching for the legendary guitar that can bring back the power of rock.
Start again.
But for choreographer Arlene Phillips, fusing the world of rock with the world of musical theatre was a difficult challenge.
I was bringing in a lot of dance until I got to my meetings with Brian and Roger.
Roger didn't want any dancing in it at all in the beginning, so there was a pretty difficult place for her to start.
Try and keep it very real, very sort of misshapen and real, like real people are doing these things.
The music was the most important part of the show, and the dance couldn't ever dominate or be bigger than the music and the voices.
Daddle, 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 daddle.
We Will Rock You wanted to keep its rock credentials in the world of musical theatre. For an opening night in May 2002, the question was whether the audience and critics would accept it.
We came to opening night. The audience went wild. They went crazy. And the next day, the reviews came out. Possibly the worst reviews ever written about any show, ever, anywhere. And we just thought, that's it. it's all over.
Wants to live forever.
The critics hate. The critics hammered us, and it was very reminiscent of how we'd been hammered as Queen in the very early days and sort of trivialised.
Very expensive to buy a ticket for the theatre. And if your newspaper, which you kind of trust, says, you know, it's just awful, it's worse than awful, don't go, it's really, it's evilly awful, it's genuinely wickedly bad, you must not go and support this. You know, it's kind of hard to say, well, I'm still going to spend £40 and the taxi and the meal. And so after the reviews, our box office was shredded.
The following day, ticket sales were slashed by up to 50%. But jukebox musicals have an advantage over normal musicals: a pre-existing fan base.
Luckily, we had this incredibly strong word of mouth, because that's what matters. People come to the theatre, and if they have a good time, they go, oh, I got to come back, I got to bring my friend, I got to bring my mum, I got to bring my son, you know, and that's what's happened with We Will Rock You over the years.
Just a poor boy, nobody loves me.
He's just a poor boy from a poor family, tearing his life from his monstrosity.
Jukebox musicals can also benefit from their rock connections. Just 2 weeks after opening night, the Queen celebrated her Golden Jubilee with a party at the Palace. In a PR coup, playing alongside the royalty of rock was the entire cast from We Will Rock You.
We Will Rock You performed in the show and just blew the audience, which was now of millions, away. They just went for it. From that moment on, it hasn't looked back. It is musical theatre for a new generation, and a generation of people that keep coming along with their backpacks and sitting down and watching We Will Rock You.
Part rock concert, part theatre, the Jukebox musical has found a new audience. But the one thing it hasn't always found is the respect of the critics.
The phrase the jukebox musical, which tends to be used in a derogative sense, I don't see why it should be. Theatre used to be where people came for their pop music. Before radio, before records, you went to the theatre. Now, I don't think it's such a bad thing that pop music is coming back to the theatre. And I think it's a wonderful development when it's good.
The Jukebox musical took pop culture and turned it into a formula for hit musicals. In 2003, composer Richard Thomas turned pop culture into an acerbic stage show that showed the musical could not only entertain, but satirise.
I'd been watching Jerry Springer quite a lot, and there was a particularly violent episode of the Jerry Springer show which was bleeped out, so you couldn't actually hear a thing, but you just saw about 8 people screaming at each other. You couldn't understand a word that was said, and I thought, oh, this is opera. And I swear it was a eureka moment. I thought, this is a show I'm going to do. And I didn't really care if anyone was going to buy it or if I could sell it. I just thought, I'm going to write this show. Whatever happens, I'm just going to do it.
You can hush all your shouting, you can hush all your bitching, you can talk to the hand, 'cause the face ain't listening.
To say we're going to take something as trashy as that American talk show where somebody says, oh, you know, you thought I was a man and we've been having sex for 40 years and actually I'm a woman. You know, something as trashy as that. And to say, no, we're going to do the opera. I mean, that's really, really witty.
My advice to you, bitch, get a face peel.
And then you go and see the show, and it opens, and the set is exactly like Springer, and the actors look exactly like the people who are on that show. And the Jerry Springer show is a piece of theatre in itself, and they completely understood that.
I don't give a fuck no more if people think I am a whore.
The conflict between high culture and low culture extended into the writing.
What I like to do is, so you got a character singing, I hate you, I hate you, hate you, but the music is saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. So this is happening at the same time. You've got 2 languages. And that's what's interesting about music theatre and opera. you can have a thing called stealth emotion, as far as I'm concerned. So you just suddenly, you're inexplicably moved halfway through Act 2. It's because the music's been working at you. Even though you've been laughing at all this fight and this all this kind of, all the mayhem, there's been this whole kind of emotional arc that you haven't really noticed.
I wanna do some living, 'cause I've done enough dying. I just wanna dance. I just wanna fucking dance.
Opening in 2003, Jerry Springer the Opera received positive reviews and, more importantly, appealed to a new audience, with 50% of ticket buyers being first-time theatregoers. It became such a hit phenomenon that the BBC took the unusual step of broadcasting the musical in its entirety.
Prior to it being broadcast, there was this massive internet backlash, and thousands of people complained who'd never even seen the show.
What do we want? Cheerios! When do we want it?
They claimed it was, total blasphemy, and that got into the Sun, and the Sun said there were 6,000 or 8,000 swear words, when in fact there's only 174, we counted. That includes, including dick and tit, which aren't technically swear words, but we thought we'd chuck them all in.
It contains a very high level of swearing and bad language and aspects, this man dressed up in a nappy saying, well, I'm Jesus and I'm a bit gay. I mean, I think that is calculated to cause considerable offence.
And then there were death threats, and there was, all the BBC the BBC executives had to be put on police guard on the night of the transmission, and in fact everybody was on the police guard apart from the writers, which we realised, oh, don't worry.
I remember a scene in which Christ was portrayed by a large man wearing nothing but a nappy, and that, to my mind, as a middle stump Anglican, I found that upsetting.
So you're doing Jerry Springer the musical, and in the second half you bring in the devil. So you're going to get criticised.
Whether for commercial or controversial reasons, 6 weeks after the BBC broadcast, Jerry Springer the Opera closed. Plans for a UK tour were cancelled.